Commander Voxstar of the Dominion's 7th War Fleet stood before the massive holographic display aboard the battleship Iron Fist, his scaled fingers drumming a restless rhythm against the command console. The tactical data streaming across the glowing interface painted a picture that should have filled him with confidence. Yet something gnawed at the edges of his consciousness like a parasite, preparing for what High Command had classified as a routine planetary acquisition. 800 vessels of destruction floated in perfect formation beyond the viewports, each one bristling with enough firepower to reduce continents to molten slag. The largest invasion force ever assembled by the Dominion, and it was all focused on one insignificant blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Another backwater planet ripe for conquest, growled his second-in-command, Captain Mordock, his reptilian features twisted into what passed for a grin among their species. The captain's scarred hide bore the marks of dozens of successful planetary subjugations, each one a testament to the Dominion's relentless expansion across the galaxy. These humans haven't even mastered interstellar travel. Their weapons are primitive chemical projectiles that couldn't scratch our hull plating. Mordock gestured dismissively at the intelligence reports floating in the air between them. Look at this data, Commander. Their most advanced spacecraft barely reaches their own moon. They fight wars with metal projectiles and explosive chemicals. It's almost insulting that High Command is sending our entire fleet for this. But Voxstar's yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the data more carefully. The intelligence reports were comprehensive, detailed, and absolutely terrifying in their implications. Not for what they said, but for what they didn't say. Something felt fundamentally wrong about this entire operation, like walking into a trap that everyone else was too blind to see. For months, disturbing whispers had been circulating through the Dominion's intelligence network, stories that made no logical sense, reports that defied everything they knew about warfare and conquest. Entire fleets vanishing without a trace in human space. Ships that simply stopped responding to communications. No wreckage, no distress signals, no survivors to tell the tale. Just ... silence. The first incident had been dismissed as a navigation error, the second as equipment failure. But by the 5th missing fleet, even the most skeptical intelligence officers were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. What could make a fully armed battle group simply disappear? What force could neutralize advanced alien technology without leaving so much as a debris field? "Sir," called out the communications officer, his voice cutting through the bridge's low hum like a blade through silk. "Priority transmission from High Command." The holographic projectors activated with a soft chime, and the towering figure of Admiral Kexul materialized in the air above them. His battle-scarred carapace gleamed under the bridge lights, each mark a story of conquest and domination. Kexul had personally overseen the subjugation of 17 worlds, turning thriving civilizations into footnotes in Dominion history books. Commander Voxstar, the Admiral's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. You were to proceed with the Earth's subjugation immediately. Intelligence reports indicate the humans have been spreading false information about some mythical defense capability through their primitive communication networks. Ignore these fabrications. They're nothing more than desperate lies from a doomed species. Voxstar felt his spine stiffen. What about the missing scout fleets, Admiral? It's a Devastator battle group, the Annihilator Squadron. The Subjugator Expeditionary Force, all of them, simply vanished in human space. Kexul's compound eyes flashed with annoyance, the way they always did when subordinates questioned his judgment. Equipment failures, navigation errors. Space is vast, Commander, and even our technology isn't perfect. The humans want us to believe in ghost stories and phantom weapons. They're playing psychological warfare with smoke and mirrors. The Admiral leaned forward, his image flickering slightly. You command 800 vessels, the largest invasion force ever assembled in Dominion history. We have dreadnoughts that can crack planets, fighters that move faster than light, and weapons that can sterilize entire star systems. These humans are barely out of their Stone Age. Crush them quickly and put an end to these ridiculous rumors. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in relative silence. Voxstar found himself staring at the tactical display, showing Earth's solar system. 9 planets, 1 star, billions of primitive creatures who had never ventured beyond their own planetary system. It should have been the easiest conquest in military history, yet the whispers persisted in the darkness of classified intelligence. Reports, stories that made hardened warriors wake up screaming. Tales of ships that simply stopped existing, crews that vanished as if they had never been born. And something lurking in the void between stars that defied every law of physics and warfare the Dominion had ever discovered. What if the humans weren't as defenseless as they appeared? What if those missing fleets hadn't suffered equipment failures or navigation errors? What if something was out there, something that High Command refused to acknowledge, something that could turn the galaxy's most powerful military force into nothing more than empty space and unanswered radio calls? The thought sent a chill down Voxstar's spine that had nothing to do with the climate control systems. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a species that made him question the fundamental nature of warfare itself. But as he stared at that innocent-looking blue world on his tactical display, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to discover something that would change everything they thought they knew about power, conquest, and survival in the cold depths of space. The countdown to Earth had begun, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, something was waiting for them. 4 days into their approach to Earth, the first anomaly appeared like a ghost materializing. From the void of space, Commander Voxstar had been reviewing battle plans when the alert tone cut through the bridge's steady hum, instantly transforming the atmosphere from confident anticipation to electric tension. "Sir, we're detecting a single human vessel on direct intercept course," reported the sensor officer, his voice cracking with disbelief. The poor creature's scales had shifted to a pale, green-assure sign of confusion among his species. "It's just one ship." Voxstar leaned forward in his command throne, his claws automatically extending as predatory instincts kicked in. On the main display, a sleek vessel approached with unsettling confidence. The ship was clearly human design, but something about it felt fundamentally wrong, like looking at a familiar face that had been subtly altered in ways you couldn't quite identify. The vessel moved with purpose, showing no signs of the panic or desperate maneuvering they'd come to expect from inferior species facing the Dominion's overwhelming firepower. No evasive patterns, no frantic communications to home base, no desperate attempts to flee. Just steady, deliberate approach toward 800 ships of war. "Weapons, signature," Voxstar demanded, his yellow eyes narrowing as he studied the approaching craft. "Minimal, sir. Standard defensive armaments only. Nothing that could even scratch our escort fighters, let alone our capital ships." The tactical officer paused, his voice taking on a puzzled tone. "Sir, it's broadcasting on multiple frequencies. The signal is ... It's remarkably clear for such primitive technology." Captain Mordoc's mandibles clicked in amusement, the sound echoing across the bridge like breaking glass. "One ship once. To have a conversation with our entire fleet? These humans are either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." My credits are on stupid. But Voxstar felt that familiar chill creeping up his spine again. Something about this situation screamed danger, in ways his rational mind couldn't process. Put it through. The voice that filled the bridge was distinctly human calm, steady, almost conversational. There was no fear in it, no desperation, no pleading. Just the tone of someone delivering information they'd rather not have to share. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran vessel Defiance. I need to speak with the commanding officer of the Dominion fleet." The bridge crew exchanged glances. "Morrison, what kind of name was that? And why did he sound like he was calling to arrange a dinner party rather than facing down the most powerful military force in the galaxy?" "This is Commander Voxstar of the 7th Warfleet," he replied, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "State your business, human." There was a pause, not the hesitation of fear, but the careful consideration of someone choosing their words with surgical precision. When Morrison spoke again, there was something chilling in his tone. Not fear, but what sounded almost like ... regret. Commander, I'm authorized to offer you one final opportunity. Turn your fleet around and leave this system immediately. This isn't a negotiation. It's the last warning you'll receive before you make a mistake that can't be unmade. The bridge erupted in harsh laughter from the crew. 800 ships against one? The mathematical impossibility of the situation was so absurd, it bordered on comedy. Mordok's laughter was particularly loud, scarred hide rippling with amusement. Voxstar raised a claw for silence, but his mind was racing. The human's words echoed the whispers from the intelligence network's warnings about mistakes that couldn't be unmade, about fleets that simply vanished. You dare threaten us with a single vessel against 800? We're not threatening you, Commander. Morrison's voice carried an odd quality, the same tone a parent might use when warning a child about touching a hot stove. We're trying to save you. It's whispers in your intelligence networks. Those missing fleets. They weren't lies or equipment failures. They were warnings. The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop several degrees. Voxstar felt his blood turning to ice in his veins. What are you talking about? It's a Devastator battle group, the Annihilator Squadron. It's a Subjugator expeditionary force. Do you really think they all suffered equipment failures in the same region of space? You think we're so primitive that we can't defend ourselves? Do you think we're alone out here? The human ship began to change course, and what happened next defied every law of physics the Dominion had ever discovered. The vessel started accelerating away from the fleet at speeds that should have been impossible, faster than any known propulsion system should allow, faster than the laws of relativity should permit. Sir, the sensor officer's voice trembled. Like a leaf in a hurricane, that vessel is exceeding light speed without entering hyperspace. That's impossible. Our physics models say it can't happen. But it was happening. Right before their eyes, the human ship was moving at velocities that made their most advanced technology look like a child's toy. The Defiance wasn't just fast, was operating on principles that the Dominion's greatest scientists claimed were impossible. How? Voxstar whispered, his voice barely audible above the bridge's suddenly frantic activity. How are they doing that? As the Defiance vanished into the void like a ghost dissolving into mist, Captain Morrison's voice echoed one final time across the bridge. We tried to warn you, Commander. Now you'll understand why the others went silent. The communication cut off, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. 800 ships of war, the most powerful military force in galactic history. And they'd just been made to look like amateurs by a single human vessel operating on technology that shouldn't exist. Voxstar stared at the empty space where the Defiance had been, his mind struggling to process what he'd just witnessed. The whispers in the intelligence network suddenly didn't seem like rumors anymore. They seemed like prophecies. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, something was waiting for them to discover just how wrong they'd been about everything. The real question wasn't whether they could conquer Earth. The real question was whether they'd live long enough to regret trying. But just like the power of compounding in financial markets, where small actions build into massive consequences over time, the Dominion was about to learn that underestimating your opponent can lead to results that grow exponentially beyond your worst nightmares. The attack came not from space, but from within reality itself, as if the universe had suddenly decided to rewrite its own rules without bothering to consult the Dominion's physics textbooks. It started with the outer patrol. Ships, those smaller vessels positioned on the fleet's perimeter, like sentries guarding a fortress. One moment they were maintaining perfect formation, their crews going about their routine duties, and the next moment they simply stopped mid-flight. No explosions that would have lit up the darkness with brilliant fire. No weapon signatures that their advanced sensors could detect. No desperate distress calls crackling across the communication channels. They just ceased to exist as functioning military units. The bridge of the Iron Fist had been humming with the confident energy of impending victory when the first anomaly readings began flooding in. Commander Voxstar had been reviewing final attack patterns when the universe decided to teach him that some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Report. Star. roared as alarms began shrieking throughout the bridge like the screams of dying gods, their piercing wails drowning out all other sounds. "Sir, we've lost contact with Battle Group Alpha," called out the communications officer, his voice tight with confusion that was rapidly transforming into terror. "All 37 vessels are showing as ... inactive." Voxstar's scaled hands gripped the command console until his claws left gouges in the metal. "Inactive? What does that mean? Are they destroyed? Under attack? Give me something I can understand." "They're still there, sir. Still completely intact. But they're not responding to communications, and their power signatures have gone dark. It's like someone just ... turned them off."
Tactical display painted a picture that should have been impossible. Ship after ship showed green status, indicators hull.
Integrity, perfect, life support systems functioning, weapons fully operational. But the crews weren't responding to any form of communication. It was as if 800 of the galaxy's most elite warriors had simultaneously decided to take a nap. On the holographic display, red indicators began spreading like a virus through the fleet formation. The pattern was systematic, methodical, almost surgical in its precision. Ship after ship went silent, not destroyed in the glorious explosions that marked proper space battles, but somehow neutralized in ways that defied everything the Dominion knew about warfare. "It's happening to Battle Group Beta now," reported the tactical officer, panic creeping into his voice like ice water seeping through hull breaches. "Sir, whatever this is, it's moving through our fleet systematically. 20 ships just went dark in the last 30 seconds. Captain Mordoc's mandibles were clicking rapidly, a sure sign of stress among his species. Commander, this isn't possible. Our shields are at full power. Our weapons are armed and ready. How can something neutralize our ships without triggering? A single defensive system." But Voxstar wasn't listening to his second-in-command anymore. He was watching the impossible unfold before his eyes, seeing the most powerful military force in galactic history being dismantled piece by something that apparently didn't even register as a threat to their sensors. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't a battle. This was an extermination. "All vessels, implement Emergency Protocol 9. He shouted into the fleet-wide communication system. "Scatter formation, random vectors, maximum burn break contact, and retreat to hyperspace. Coordinates." His words were cut off as every light on the bridge died simultaneously, plunging the command center into absolute darkness. For a moment that stretched like eternity, the only sounds were the panicked breathing of his crew and the distant hum of failing systems. Then emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in hellish red light that made the bridge look like the inside of a dying star. The crimson illumination cast twisted shadows across the faces of his crew, transforming familiar features into nightmarish masks. "Commander," whispered the sensor operator, his voice barely audible above the emergency klaxons, "something's happening to our crew." Voxstar spun around to see his bridge staff standing motionless at their stations like statues carved from living flesh. Not dead. He could see their chests rising and falling with steady breaths, but completely still, their eyes staring ahead with expressions of vacant peace that was somehow more terrifying than any scream of agony. "What ... What's happening? To them?" he demanded. But his voice echoed in the red-lit bridge with no one conscious to hear it. That's when the voice came not through the communication system, not through the speakers, but somehow directly in his mind. It bypassed his ears entirely, speaking to him from inside his own consciousness in a way that made his scales crawl with primal terror. The voice was ancient beyond measure, vast as the space between galaxies, and utterly alien in ways that made his brain struggle to process its existence. It was like trying to have a conversation with the concept of infinity itself. We are the Guardians. We have watched over this species for ages beyond counting, through their darkest nights and brightest dawns. They are not ready for war, but they are ready for peace. Who are you? Voxstar demanded, backing toward his command. Thrown as if a few feet of distance could somehow protect him from something that existed partially outside normal space-time? Show yourselves. We are what your nightmares whisper about in the dark corners of your mind. We are the reason your fleets vanish without a trace. We are the protectors of Earth, and we have been waiting for you. Asterisk through the bridge is massive. Viewport's Voxstar saw them for the first time, shapes that his mind couldn't fully comprehend. Entities that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that his three-dimensional thinking couldn't grasp. They moved between his ships like living shadows, each one easily the size of a battleship, but flowing with organic grace that defied the mechanical nature of spacecraft. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time, like watching the birth and death of stars compressed into a single moment of cosmic significance. His warrior's mind tried to categorize them as threats to be eliminated, but every instinct screamed that these beings operated on a level of reality that made concepts like enemy and allies seem laughably primitive. Asterisk. Your weapons cannot touch us because we exist beyond the reach of violence. Your shields cannot stop us because we do not attack, we simply turn off the violence itself. Asterisk, as he watched in helpless fascination. The Guardians moved through his fleet with casual indifference, their very presence neutralizing centuries of military technology. 800 ships of war, the pride of the Dominion, reduced to floating museums in a matter of minutes. The universe, it seemed, still had a few tricks up its sleeve that the Dominion had never learned. And just like the power of compounding interest, where small percentages build into massive wealth over time, the Guardians had been quietly accumulating power for millennia, waiting for the right moment to demonstrate that some forces in the universe operate on scales that make military conquest look like children playing with toys. But the real question wasn't what the Guardians' wit was, what they wanted. And whether Commander Voxstar would live long enough to find out. As the Guardians moved through the fleet like cosmic surgeons performing precise operations, Voxstar found himself completely alone on the bridge, the only crew member still conscious. In a tomb of sleeping warriors, the silence was deafening, broken only by the steady hum of life support systems and the distant echo of his own panicked breathing. Through the communication system, he could hear the same surreal scene playing out across every ship in his mighty fleet. Crew members falling into peaceful stasis mid-sentence, weapon systems powering down with soft electronic sighs, engines going silent as if the universe itself had decided to hit the pause button on 800 vessels of war. The sound was haunting, not the chaos of battle or the screams of the dying, but the gentle whisper of an entire military force simply stopping. It was like listening to the galaxy's most powerful symphony orchestra gradually falling asleep, one instrument at a time, until only silence remained. Asterisk, you wonder why the humans summoned us. Asterisk, the ancient voice continued in his mind, each word carrying the weight of millennia. Asterisk, you think them weak, primitive creatures barely worthy of your attention. But they possess something your species abandoned long ago, the wisdom to know when they need help. Asterisk, before Voxstar could respond, images flooded his consciousness like a dam bursting in his mind. These weren't his own memories, but visions of Earth's history playing out in vivid detail. He saw wars, yes, conflicts that raged across continents and consumed entire generations, but he also saw healing, destruction followed by creation. A species that had developed the power to split atoms and chosen to build power plants instead of just bombs. The images came faster now, overwhelming his senses. Humans pulling back from the brink of nuclear annihilation. Cities rebuilt from ashes, former enemies becoming allies. A species that had stared into the abyss of their own violent nature and made the conscious choice to step back from it. Asterisk, they contacted us not for conquest, but for protection. They understood something that your warrior culture never learned, that in a universe full of predators, sometimes the prey must have guardians. Asterisk, were there allies? Voxstar managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper in the crimson-lit bridge. Asterisk, we are their shepherds. Just as they learned to protect the weaker species on their world, the endangered animals, the fragile ecosystems, the vulnerable populations, we protect them against threats they cannot yet face alone. Asterisk, the comparison hit him like a physical blow. The humans weren't just another species to be conquered. They were under the protection of beings so ancient and powerful that the Dominion's greatest achievements looked like children's toys by comparison. But his tactical training kicked, and despite his terror, even facing the impossible, a military mind still sought to understand the scope of the threat. How many of you are there? Asterisk enough. We exist in the spaces between stars, in the quantum foam of reality itself, in dimensions your physics cannot yet comprehend. We are ancient beyond your understanding, and we have been waiting for a species worthy of our protection. Asterisk and the humans. They're worthy? The pause that followed seemed to stretch across eternity. When the Guardian finally responded, there was something almost like pride in that vast alien voice. Asterisk, they are the first species we have encountered that looked up at the stars and dreamed not of conquest, but of connection. The first to develop the power to destroy worlds and choose instead to heal them. They are young, but they show promise that we have not seen in eons. Asterisk, through the viewports, Voxstar could see his mighty fleet, 100 vessels of war that had been the pride of the Dominion, floating helplessly in space like discarded toys after a child's tantrum. The Guardians moved among them with casual indifference, their very presence neutralizing centuries of military technology and tactical advancement. It was humbling in a way that redefined the word itself. The apex predators of the galaxy, the ultimate expression of military might and technological superiority. But these beings treated their greatest achievements with the same casual disregard that a human might show toward an anthill. Asterisk, your people will sleep now. When they wake, they will remember this day. They will remember that Earth is protected. They'll remember that some species in this universe have evolved beyond the need for conquest. Asterisk, the Guardian's voice carried a finality that made Voxstar's scales crawl with primal fear. What happens to us? What happens to my crew? Asterisk, they will live. They will dream. And in their dreams, they will see what we have shown you, that the universe is vast enough for all species to find their place without taking someone else's. Some will choose to stay in the sanctuary we have prepared. Others will return to your space with new understanding. Asterisk, as the words echoed in his mind, Voxstar realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Not the destruction of a fleet, but its transformation. Not the end of conquest, but the beginning of something entirely new. Red emergency lighting began to dim, and he felt a strange peace settling over his consciousness like a warm blanket. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the image of Earth. That small blue world that had just redefined the balance of power in the galaxy. But here's the thing about power. It's not always about having the biggest weapon or the largest fleet. Sometimes it's about knowing when to ask for help and having the wisdom to step back from the brink. The humans had discovered something that the Dominion's warrior culture never could. That true strength sometimes comes from admitting your limitations and finding allies who believe in your potential. And just like the power of compounding, where small, consistent actions build into massive results over time. The Guardians had been quietly accumulating influence and capability for millennia, waiting for the right moment to demonstrate that some forces in the universe operate on scales that make military conquest look like a child's game. The question wasn't whether the Dominion could defeat the humans. It was whether they could learn from them. Voxstar awoke to the gentle hum of life support systems, and the unsettling realization that he was completely alone in a cramped escape pod, drifting through the infinite emptiness between stars like a message in a bottle cast into an ocean of darkness. The last thing he remembered was the crimson emergency lighting of his bridge and that ancient voice, speaking directly into his consciousness. His fleet was not destroyed in the glorious explosions that marked proper space battles, but simply relocated, as if 800 vessels of war had been carefully picked up and moved somewhere else by cosmic forces beyond his comprehension. The Guardians had taken them, along with their crews, leaving only him to carry their message back to the Dominion like a sole survivor from a shipwreck that had never actually happened. The escape pod was standard military issue, designed for short-term survival rather than comfort. Every surface was functional metal and plastic, cramped and utilitarian in the way that military engineers preferred. But it was equipped with everything he needed to survive the journey home: food, water, air recycling, and most importantly, a communication system that was about to deliver the most important conversation of his life. The pod's communication system activated with a soft chime, and Captain Morrison's voice filled the cramped cabin with the same calm confidence he'd displayed when facing down 800 ships with a single vessel. "Commander Voxtar, I hope you're comfortable. The Guardians wanted to ensure you survived to tell your story." Voxtar's claws automatically extended as his predatory instincts kicked in. Even though there was no enemy to fight in the confines of the tiny pod. "Where is my fleet? Where are my people?" Safe Morrison replied. And there was genuine warmth in his voice, the tone of someone delivering good news rather than gloating over victory. "The Guardians don't kill, they relocate. Your crew is currently on a world we've prepared specifically for refugees from aggressive species. They'll be well cared for, given a chance to learn a different way of living. Some will choose to stay. Others will eventually return to Dominion space with a completely new perspective on what it means to be alive in this universe." The implications hit Voxtar like a physical blow. His warriors, his loyal crew members who had followed him across the galaxy in pursuit of conquest and glory, were now ... what? Prisoners? Students? Refugees in their own story? He slumped in his pilot's chair, the weight of defeat settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. "And I'm to be your messenger?" "You're to be our warning," Morrison corrected gently. "The Guardians have been protecting Earth for the past 60 years. Ever since we first detected hostile alien activity in nearby systems, every fleet that's approached our world with violent intent has been ... redirected. The whispers in your intelligence networks, they were all completely true. 60 years.
Ow.
The number echoed in Voxtar's mind like a death knell. For 6 decades, the Dominion had been sending fleets into what they thought was empty space, never realizing they were walking into a trap that had been set by beings older than their civilization. "But why leave survivors at all?" he demanded, his warrior's mind still struggling to understand the logic of mercy. "Why not just destroy us and end the threat permanently?" Morrison's voice softened, taking on the patient tone of a teacher explaining a complex concept to a struggling student. "Because that's not who we are, Commander. We don't want to rule the galaxy or eliminate other species we don't dream of. Conquest or domination. We just want to be left alone to grow, to learn, to become something better than we were. The Guardians help us maintain that choice." The escape pod's navigation system activated with a series of soft beeps automatically, setting course for Dominion space. As the tiny vessel began to accelerate, Voxtar found himself staring back through the small viewport at Earth's solar system. That unremarkable yellow star that had just redefined the balance of power in the entire galaxy. It was humbling, too. Realize that the most significant military defeat in Dominion history had come not from superior weapons or better tactics, but from a species that had simply chosen a different path. The humans had looked up at the stars and seen not territories to conquer, but neighbors to meet. Commander Morrison's voice continued, "Carrying the weight of absolute certainty, when you return to your people, tell them this: Earth is not defenseless. We may not have the weapons to conquer star systems or the technology to build massive fleets, but we have something far more valuable: friends who believe in our potential. The universe is vast enough for all of us to find our place in it without taking someone else's." As the pod's engines engaged and prepared to jump to hyperspace, Voxtar realized he was carrying more than just news back to the Dominion. He was carrying proof that everything they thought they knew about power, conquest, and survival was fundamentally wrong. The jump to hyperspace engaged with a familiar lurch, and suddenly the stars elongated into lines of light as the escape pod began its journey home. But even as he traveled through the twisted dimensions of faster-than-light travel, Voxtar couldn't stop thinking about what he'd witnessed. The humans had achieved something his warrior species never could. They had found protectors not through strength or conquest, but through the promise of who they might become. They had looked at their own capacity for violence and chosen peace. They had developed the power to destroy worlds and decided instead to heal them. The rumor that had been dismissed by high command, the whispers that had been explained away, as equipment failures and navigation errors, had been completely true. Earth was protected by forces that operated on scales the Dominion couldn't even comprehend. And now the galaxy would never be the same, as his escape pod carried him home with news that would shake the Dominion to its very foundations. Boxstar understood that he'd witnessed the birth of a new age, an age where some species had evolved. Beyond the need for conquest, where wisdom trumped warfare, and where the most powerful force in the universe wasn't the ability to destroy, but the courage to choose a different path. In the depths of space behind him, the Guardians continued their eternal watch, protectors of a species that had chosen connection over conquest. And in the growing whisper networks of a dozen civilizations, a new understanding was beginning to spread like wildfire. Some worlds were not meant to be conquered, and some species were destined for something far greater than war. The universe had just learned that sometimes the most powerful force isn't the one that can destroy everything in its path, but the one that chooses not to. And just like the power of compounding, where small, consistent choices build into massive results over time, the humans had been quietly building something that would reshape the galaxy forever, not through conquest, but through the simple decision to be better than their worst impulses. The end.